So you've got a short story to a place where you're really, really happy with it, and there isn't anything else you can think of to make it better. It's really the best it can be, and it's time for it to go out in the world. What do you do then? First, put it away. Put it away for at least a month. Bring it back, take it out on hard copy. A month, 6 weeks later, look at it again. You still love it? See anything you could change? See anything you could fix? Most importantly, see anything you can cut. Could you make this shorter? Could you go through carefully and shave 10% off your word count? If you can, do that. Then put it aside again. When you've done this a few times, when you can't make it shorter, when it's given time to cool off because you can't see it right when you've originally finished it, then it's time to make a list. Or rather, with the 4 to 6 weeks while it was cooling off, you've been writing something else, I hope, which is how we get our writing done, by working on more than one project at once, especially when it's short stories. And you've been making a list. That is a list of markets you want to publish in someday that would be great to publish in. You're going to make a list. You're going to keep this list for yourself, and you're going to keep track of a bunch of stuff. Which markets do you like? Where do you want to send? When are they open to submissions? Who edits them? You want to put an editor's name on the cover letter. What are their requests? What's their word count? What are their genre preferences? What do they do? Now you should know a bunch of this from doing research, from reading at least a few stories from all these journals. So you know what you're sending your story to. Make that list and divide it into tiers. Now, in the world of science fiction, fantasy, and horror publishing, most submissions are not simultaneous. You have to send it one place at a time, or people are going to be upset. You send it one place, you wait, it comes back, you send it to another place, sometimes immediately the same day, you send it to another place. Definitely, your story will not get published by sitting around. Your story will not get published by sitting around between submissions. Now, didn't I just tell you to wait and delay sending out in the first place? Yes, but the reason for that is you don't want to send something out before it's really absolutely finished and cut to be as short as it can be, because every rejection is the last chance that story will ever get at that magazine. When you send something out before it's ready, you guarantee rejection, and you blow your shot at sending the better, later finished version to that place. Okay. Literary magazines mostly, but not all, accept simultaneous submissions, where you're submitting to a number of places at the same time and waiting to hear back. Let me talk about this. You don't want to send to the best places and the okay places and the in between places all in the same batch. So here it's usually a batch system where you're going to send your stories to a few really, really good places, your dream within a dream markets, and then they'll reject you. And then you'll send them to your dream markets, your ordinary dream markets, and then you're kind of like daydream markets, and the very good and the more than respectable. You're going to go down the food chain. One of the things you can't research is how much any of these markets solicit or publish solicited or agent manuscripts. They have a they they're open to unsolicited submissions. What is unsolicited? It's you. You sent them something they didn't ask for. It's unsolicited. And think of it. You sent them something they didn't ask for. You do it professionally, you do it nicely, but they didn't request to see this manuscript. You're competing for whatever empty open slots they have after they fill out their magazine with people they've asked for stories or people whose agents have sold stories to them, etc., etc., etc. What percentage of that? No one will ever admit that. No one will ever admit that. A few places will say, we're all unagented. Good for them. That everything comes in through the so called slush pile. You want to make a bunch of tiers and you wait and you hear back. And then after you've waited a certain time, even if you haven't heard back from one or two places, you send out to another group of places moving down the list. It's important to sort this out. There are various ways people sort out these lists and rank their preferred tiers. I have a very elaborate spreadsheet, which I will not share with you. Some of these there are lists out there that rank lit magazines. By things like what prizes they have won, what award collections they're in the annual award collections, et cetera, et cetera. And that is useful as far as it goes. But these are things you can find out for yourself by reading the award collections when they, getting them from the public library and reading them, taking notes about who is getting published where. But that shouldn't override what you like. An esteemed place where you don't like anything is still not good for you. If you don't like them, they're almost certainly not going to like you. It is what the economists call a two-way matching problem. There are plenty of places out there where you like everything and they won't like you and you're not ready to publish there yet. Or even if you are, there are a lot of other people who are ready and you just didn't make the cut this time. There are other places that you don't like and you don't like what they publish because you don't write that kind of thing and that's not your aesthetic and that's not your vibe, so you don't want it. You don't really want them actually, and they don't want you. If you're writing science fiction that's based on kind of let's get back to the 30s, the good old days, rock'em sock'em, robots, punches, white dudes with big chins, and you send it to Artie Slipstream magazine, they're gonna be like, "What? We're Artie Slipstream magazine." If you're writing an Artie Slipstream story called Patterns of Rain on the Rooftop, that has a robot, but is it a robot? I don't know if it's a robot, and you send that to Retro Futures magazine, which wants to make everything wants to get back to the first 5 years, just the first 5 years of Robert Heinlein's career. They are going to pass on that immediately. Now, even if you do everything right, you're going to get rejected a lot. That's another video. When you're ready to send, two more things. Make a budget. Some places do electronic submissions for free. We are always grateful to those places. Some places do electronic submissions for free, even though they're only kind of open. They're not necessarily even though they're going to take tens of thousands of submissions a year and take maybe none of them. I'm talking about very large commercial magazines that are very hard to break into without an agent. That's great. A lot of places charge a fee, usually around $3, to pay the software provider that runs their submission software. But you are not made of money. So make a list of which places charge and which ones do not. Some places now, there are some small magazines that will have a free submission period for part of the year and charge at other times. Do your research, figure out when that is. And if you're going to pay submission fees to Lit Mags, ask yourself seriously how many you could budget that. A few places still take submissions by mail, which is probably a tiny bit cheaper. It's a tiny bit cheaper than submission fees online, especially if the manuscript is disposable. But then you've got to pay. You give them the manuscript. You send them an envelope. You send them a smaller SAISY self-addressed stamped envelope for their reply, but not to get your manuscript back. I leave it to you on how expensive your printing and copying costs are, and where this works out for you. Make a budget. How much can you spend in a given month, year, season on submission costs? You get the best, cleanest, best formatted manuscript of your story you can. You write a cover letter. How to write a cover letter is a whole separate lesson. Let me just say three things right now. It is short, it is professional, It is polite. And there are a whole bunch of things you don't put in there to keep it short, professional, and polite. You send it off and you forget about it. You don't watch the mail. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't watch your inbox. It will take weeks, it will take months, it will take a ridiculous amount of time. Um, in in the last few years, the fastest acceptance I've gotten from a journal was, was I think 51 days. The longest was 502 days. That's right. That is much more than a year. Funny thing, the story I sent, those stories, the 51-day acceptance, the 502-day acceptance. I sent those stories to those magazines on the same day. So 51 and 502 days later, I got acceptances out of that batch. Your mileage may vary. Don't make yourself crazy thinking about that. Oh, I talked a little bit how to rank literary magazines. For genre magazines, often the ranking is about pay rate, which makes sense. About, is this a science fiction writers of America professional market that pays 8 or 10 cents a word? Then you want to move down to the semi-pro markets, et cetera, et cetera. And those tiers are more easily established. Even there, your mileage may vary. The magazines that are publishing professional pay rate work have very different tastes. So you might genuinely have written a story that would appeal to every single one of those top markets, but that's damned unlikely. That is very unlikely. The idea that you wrote a story that Asimov wants, and Analog wants, and fantasy and science fiction wants, and Clark's World wants, and Apex wants, that is not your problem. But you should sort out what order you are going to send, which one do you want most? Send it there, then the next one, then the next one. Don't let the rejections throw you. The next lesson is about how to cope with rejections. The best thing about dealing with having a story rejected, and everybody's stories get rejected. Very few things are, almost nothing that's published unsolicited is published in the first place it's sent. The important thing is that when something comes back, you know where to send it next.